All right, welcome everybody. We're going to get started now. We're going to be talking about unlocking mental fitness for a thriving marriage. Great to see you. If you're joining us on Facebook, do me a favor. If you're watching this live, just type live in the description there or in the comment section. And if you're watching this on replay, just type replay in there. That way we know whether you watched it live or on replay. That way we can connect with you, answer your questions, and get to know you a little bit better. So I'm excited about talking about a thriving marriage tonight. I'm going to ask you to do me a favor, take a moment, shut down all your distractions, put your phone on vibrate, get comfortable, take out a pen and a piece of paper, and take a few deep breaths. It can be really helpful for us just to, when we go from one thing to another and we take a transition moment and we just breathe, right? The Bible says, be still and know that I am God. So just take a moment and be still and just know that God is God. Know that God will be exalted in your relationships. Know that God will be exalted in your marriage, if that's why you're here tonight. Feel your feet flat on the floor. Feel your body, the weight of your body in your chair. And just notice the rising and the falling of your chest and your stomach for a moment. Notice what that feels like to just be still and to know that He is God. All right. Well, I am Dr. Vinnie Cappetta. I'm a pastor, I'm a counselor, and I'm also a coach. And what I spend most of my time doing is helping people find their way through grief and trauma, and then give them the skills to thrive in their marriage and other relationships. A little bit about me. I lost my mother and my stepfather to very violent deaths back in 1984, just before my 11th birthday. And the pain was so great, the weight was so great, I didn't want to live anymore. I was trying to figure out as a almost 11-year-old how to make the pain stop. And that's when God pulled me out of that nasty, slimy pit, and He placed my feet on a firm foundation. And even so, I struggled for the next 9 years with unhealthy patterns. They were my response to grief, my response to trauma. And I didn't know it at the time, but I'm going to show you tonight how I had built up these survival skills to survive what happened to me. But those survival skills that helped me survive didn't help me thrive. And so I was going around in circles for 9 years. Around 19, I finally surrendered all of that to God, and I went to study for the ministry, and I've been a pastor for the last 29 years. And about 22 years ago, I realized that counseling was something that I enjoyed doing, and that's when I began my counseling journey. But most people will say the best thing about me are these girls here, my wife, Heather, of 29 years, my 3 girls. One is in a master's program right now, the one to the far left. The daughter to my right, right next to me is Megan, and she's in high school. And then I have my youngest there in junior high. So I have them all over the map. And they gave me the evening off here to be with you, so you can thank them if this is helpful to you. But why am I here to talk about mental fitness in marriage? Well, there's a couple reasons. And the first one I want to share with you is that one of my clients that I work with, helping them with their trauma, they sent me an assessment. I sent them to a website to take an assessment. They took the assessment and they found one I didn't know about. And they took that assessment, and I took the assessment when they sent it to me because I'm a nerd for those kinds of things. And here's what that assessment told me. It said, your mind is serving you only 55% of the time with things like empathy and gratitude and curiosity and joyful creativity and calm. But 45% of the time, your mind is sabotaging you with stress and anxiety and frustration, anger, disappointment, shame, and guilt. I wonder if anyone who's listening to this tonight is wondering what your assessment would look like. If you're wondering what your assessment would look like, drop me a note into the comments, because we'll figure out a way to get you this assessment. But this assessment got my attention, right? Because 45% of the time I'm sabotaging myself. And I sort of knew that because I was really struggling with a work project. but I had no idea that it was more pervasive. It wasn't just at work. So I spent the next 6 weeks doing a group called Positive Intelligence, or we call it PQ for short. And I'm going to share with you tonight what I learned about unlocking my own mental health, my own mental fitness as it relates to my marriage. And the strength of the program that I took part in during that 6 weeks was the fact that it's based on research. And the research that it's based on is some research that is really breakthrough research and original research by a Stanford professor named Shirzad Chamine. And he synthesized some recent discoveries across a number of different areas like neuroscience and positive psychology, cognitive behavioral psychology, and performance science. I don't know if you've ever been curious about any of those four. If that's you, drop me a comment so I can see that's you. But imagine taking the best of all these four areas of research and combining it into a program for mental fitness. That's what this man Shirzad did. And one of the first things I learned from him as I began this process was that boosting mental fitness is a matter of three core mental muscles that I need to be able to thrive in my marriage. So in the last 20 years, you may have seen that we have learned more about the brain in the last 20 years than we knew in all of human history before that time. So these breakthroughs in neuroscience have really opened our eyes to how our minds work as it relates to relationships, how we communicate, how we resolve conflict with one another, building trust, and even how we connect spiritually with our partners. So this deeper understanding gives us the tools to not only survive the challenges of marriage, because we want to do that, right? But we also want to thrive together in our marriage. And so as we dive into this concept of mental fitness, we're going to explore how applying these insights can really transform every aspect of your relationship, from communication to resilience to trust to spiritual life together. If anybody's curious about that, drop me a note into the comments so I can see that you're there. And you're probably wondering what those three core mental muscles are. And I'm going to get to that. We're going to spend the next hour or so talking about those three mental muscles. So let's talk about boosting mental fitness, because we need a definition for this before we can talk about it, right? And the definition is, this is about your capacity to respond to marriage challenges with a positive rather than a negative mindset. Before I took this program, I had a real negative idea about a specific thing in my marriage, and it was getting my way. I needed to boost my mental fitness. Now, when you think about your mental fitness, imagine the impact that your mental fitness has on your relationships, particularly marriage. It's going to impact how you communicate. It's going to impact your ability to resolve conflict. It's going to mess with your parenting. It's going to get in the way of your sex life. It's going to mess with trust and finances and resilience and your spiritual life together. There really isn't an aspect of your marriage that mental fitness doesn't touch. Whether you're mentally fit or mentally unfit, it's going to impact your marriage. Maybe you would raise your hand and you'd say, yeah, a lack of mental fitness has impacted my marriage or my relationship in one of these two areas. If so, you might want to just drop that in the chat, whatever that is, so we can learn from each other. But I'll just speak for myself. It was discontent with a particular part of my marriage that was killing me every single day, eroding the foundation of my marriage. It was almost a daily challenge for me. I was stuck in my head about this particular part of my relationship with my wife. I was battling negative thoughts about myself, about my wife, and it was my own capacity to deal with this, which was the issue, because some of you know my wife, it must have been me. It couldn't have been her, right? So why couldn't I be content in my marriage? Well, I have to talk about the power of factor analysis before I can get into that, because factor analysis is going to discover the root cause of something, and it's going to result in radical simplification. And I am a simpleton, so I need radical simplification. So that's why this appeals to me. But an example of that is, at the root of thousands of screen-based colors, there are only three factors: red, blue, and green. When I go to make my website and I want it to be a certain color cream, I have a certain formula for how much red, how much blue, and how much green, and it eventually gives me the color cream. So those three colors are what we use to make all of the, I don't know, millions of colors that we have on our screen today. So the results of factor analysis show that there are only three core muscles at the root of your mental fitness. The first one is your saboteur interceptor. You need to be able to intercept those sabotaging thoughts and feelings that enter into your mind at any given time. Two, there's the sage part of the brain, that sage muscle where really wisdom lies and where you can go seeking the mind of Christ. There's a part of your brain that helps you with that. And then the third part of your brain is what we call self-command. It's your ability to be more in control of your thoughts than your thoughts being in control of you. And I'm going to explain these three in relationship to marriage tonight as we move through the discussion tonight. So factor analysis revealed that these three muscles are important for mental fitness, but it also revealed some other important things that I want to show you that really helped me. It revealed that there are actually only 10 ways that you can self-sabotage your marriage. And there are only 5 sage powers that you need to master in order to thrive in your marriage. So these 10 ways of self-sabotage, let's talk about that. I'm going to start with the saboteurs here. I'm going to go from left to right, and I'm going to go from the top of your screen, and I'll work my way down. So we'll start at the top left, we'll move right, then we'll go down, we'll move across. You'll see the pictures there of those 10 saboteurs. So if I hit on one that you think you're familiar with, do me a favor and say something in the chat so we know that you're still there, all right? So the first one is the pleaser. You know, that person with all their 4 hearts up. They got 1 heart, but they're trying to give away 4 hearts, right? This is that person that's always trying to keep everyone else happy. And the impact of that on your marriage is that you might end up feeling resentful because your own needs aren't being met in the relationship, and your partner might feel overwhelmed by your constant need to try to please them. Okay, so that's the first one. The next one going across to the right is the avoider. I definitely have this one. This is my number 2. The description of this is that part of me that tends to shy away from conflicts and tough situations. I've never met a conflict or a tough situation I couldn't avoid. The impact on marriage is that issues in my life can just pile up and not get resolved, which can then lead to a lack of trust and a lack of open communication in the marriage. The next one's the controller. The controller is that part of us that likes to take charge and control everything, control other people, control our circumstances. And the impact on marriage is that this can lead to power struggles. This can lead to a lot of tension in the marriage, making it hard to build emotional intimacy. The next one is the restless. And the restless part of us is always looking for the next exciting thing. The impact on your marriage is that this can make your partner feel neglected, and your relationship can feel unstable because you're not really ever fully present. You're always wondering, what is that next best thing? What is that thing that I'm missing out on? And so you're not present with your partner. The next one's the victim. The victim often feels mistreated and looks for sympathy from other people. The impact on your marriage is that this can make your partner feel overwhelmed and also create a dynamic where one person feels constantly disempowered all the time because of this victim mentality. Then there's the hyperachiever. The hyperachiever in us is that part of us that measures self-worth by our accomplishments, what we get done. And the impact on your marriage is that you might neglect your partner's emotional needs. You might neglect your kids' needs, focusing more on success than on your relationship. Or you may try to overdo it as to how your marriage looks to other people, which can just put a lot of pressure on your family. The next one's the hyper-rational. The hyper-rational part of us overly focuses on logic, dismissing the emotions altogether, just trying to think things through with our logical brain. And what this does is it creates an emotional disconnect with our partner, making our partner feel undervalued and misunderstood because we really dismiss the emotional part of what they're bringing to the relationship or the discussion. The guy in the black there is the judge, and the judge is that part of you that is quick to criticize yourself, but also quick to criticize others. And the impact on your marriage for this is that the constant negativity of the judge can erode at the trust and the positive feelings that you have in the relationship. And it can really lead to a toxic environment if that judge is out of control. The next one on our list there at the very bottom left is the hypervigilant. The hypervigilant is always on high alert for what is going to happen that can be wrong, right? This is going to cause chronic stress in our relationship. It's going to make our relationship feel more like a battleground than a safe place if we're always looking over our shoulder as to what could go wrong in our marriage or what is going wrong with our spouse. And the last one there is my all-time favorite. I say my favorite in a joking way because the stickler is actually my number one. The stickler is that part of me that insists on everything being perfect and orderly. And so this rigidity is going to stifle spontaneity. It's going to stifle joy in my marriage. It's going to make it hard for me and my partner to relax and enjoy each other because I'm just looking at measuring how things are, what needs to be put in order, what's not perfect. Okay? If any of these sound familiar to you, I'd love to see something in the chat there to see that this is landing with you. So drop something in the chat for me. Now, I was shocked personally at how strong a few of these saboteurs were in my life and how little I was using these 5 powers, these sage powers that the Holy Spirit has equipped me with. And the 5 powers, I'll just say them for you now. Later in our time, I'll go into them a little bit more, but they are empathy, curiosity, creativity, passion or purpose, and then clear-headed action. Can you think and see how these might impact your marriage in a positive way? You empathizing with yourself and your spouse, you being curious about yourself and self-awareness, but curious about your spouse, being creative when it comes to figuring out how to do things in your marriage, increasing passion and purpose as to why are you even married and what does it mean to be a husband or a wife, really aligning ourselves with our values. And then clear-headed action. Sometimes we just need to make a decision. We need to step forward in a particular area of our marriage. So these are the 5 powers. We'll come back to them a little bit later. I like to talk about the judge because the judge is the number 1 saboteur. And it's the number 1 saboteur because I don't know if you have the other 10. You probably have a couple that are really messing with you, but I know every single person I've ever met in my life has this judge character in their life. You judge yourself, you judge others, you judge circumstances, and I added a 4th one to this that positive intelligence doesn't talk about. That is, we actually even judge God, right? So I might judge myself that I'm not doing a good job in my marriage. I might judge my partner that they're not treating me the right way, the way they should treat me. I might even judge stressful circumstances in my marriage as bad. I might label them as bad because I'm a judge, right? And I get to slam the gavel. And then I might judge God like Adam did in the garden. What did Adam say when God confronted him about his sin? He said, "It's the woman that you gave me." He judges God for giving him this woman who handed him the apple that or whatever fruit it was, that he knew he wasn't supposed to eat. So all of this judging leads to a toxic environment where positive feelings and open communication gets stifled and quenched. The Holy Spirit gets quenched. And it makes it difficult for us to nurture a positive and loving connection with the judge messing with us like this. So I always like to ask people around this time of the show, which one of those 4 do you recognize in your life? Judging of self, number 1, judging of others, number 2, judging of circumstances, number 3, judging of God, number 4. Drop me one of those numbers into the chat so we know that you're with us and that, yeah. So a lot of us choose 1 because it's we judge ourselves a lot. And when we judge ourselves a lot, what happens is then we also need to judge others because we put ourselves so low that we need to judge others even lower so that we have the upper hand. That's usually how it works for a lot of us. So let's look at the differences between the saboteurs that I showed you and the sage, because it's really important to understand the difference between these two. And we're really talking about regions of the brain. So the saboteurs operate in your brainstem. They operate in the limbic system. And this is the parts of your left brain. And the goal of this part of your brain is survival or surviving. The sage part of you operates in the middle prefrontal cortex of your brain. And this is where your empathy circuitry is. And this is parts of your right brain. And the goal there is really to thrive. So if you think about it, the saboteurs thrive in a mindset that's dominated by fear and anxiety and negativity. These saboteurs keep us trapped in cycles of stress and criticism, self-doubt, which can then damage our relationships and our personal well-being as well. Now, on the other hand, as we look at the sage part of us operates from a place of peace and creativity and compassion. Right? When we engage our sage, we access the deeper wisdom of God that allows us to navigate life's challenges and to do that with God's grace, which is going to lead to a healthier, more fulfilling relationship for us. So you will see this even more clear as we look at the differences in how these parts of our brain are motivated. When you think about the saboteurs are going to motivate you a certain way through negative emotions, fear, stress, anger, guilt. But the sage part of you is going to motivate you through positive emotions, the ones I mentioned earlier: empathy, curiosity, creativity, passion, and purpose. You might want to take a picture of that screen there so you can get those sage powers. But the saboteurs push us to act out of anxiety and defensiveness. And I don't know if you know this, but defensiveness is one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse when it comes to marriage. When you're defensive, you're really saying that there's something wrong with your spouse and you need to defend yourself from them. So your saboteurs are going to have a need for control here, which often leads to negative outcomes in our relationships. These behaviors may protect us in the short term, of course, yeah, but they create long-term damage because they foster conflict and mistrust and disconnection. On the other hand, the sage encourages us to approach challenges with a focus on what is possible. And the Bible tells us that with God, all things are possible. And the sage part of your brain knows this. This part of our brain seeks to build connection, to build trust, to build resilience in our relationships. If you see how these differences in motivation can impact your marriage, give me a yes in the comments there. If you can see how the saboteurs might motivate you through negative emotion, but the sage part of you might motivate you through positive emotions. If you can see how that would impact your marriage one way or another, just jot something down about that into the chat. And here's the tricky thing that I never really thought about until someone showed this to me about a year ago. The thing is, your saboteurs might generate success, but they will not generate happiness. Whereas the sage part of you will generate your highest success and sustained happiness. Let me give you an example. If you have the pleaser saboteur, the pleaser is going to get you some success because you are going to be putting your spouse's needs first and steering clear of any conflicts. And the pleaser is going to keep your household calm and peaceful. Sort of. The happiness impact of the pleaser is that over time, the pleaser starts to feel resentful because I'm unfulfilled, because I'm not getting my own needs met, which will then make me unhappy in the long run. You see how that works? It's just one example of the saboteur motivating us, but not toward happiness. Let me ask you a question. In marriage, are negative emotions good for you? Thumbs up, thumbs down, or thumbs sideways? If you're watching me on Facebook, drop a comment there whether you think negative emotions are good for your marriage, bad for your marriage, or you're not sure, you don't care, thumbs sideways, right? So thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs sideways, yes, no, I don't care. give us an answer there so we know that you're with us. So are negative emotions good for us? Are they good for our marriage? Well, let me ask you another question. Is pain good for you? Well, here's a guy that's got his hand on the stove. Pain is good and helpful, but only for, I'd say, 1 second. Negative emotions are only helpful for 1 second as an alert signal. Hey, you put your hand there and you got burned. Don't put a child on the stove. Don't put your keys on the stove. Don't put your wallet on the stove now, right? My stove is right there when I walk in the kitchen, so it collects all kinds of things. But when I burn my hand on there, I know that the burner's hot. I'm not going to put other stuff on there, right? When you stay in negative emotion, it's going to hurt your ability to be able to see clearly and to respond to your spouse with empathy and curiosity and creativity and that laser focused action that we mentioned earlier. So think about it this way, just as shorthand, because it just helps us. Negative emotion equals sabotage or saboteur. You see, when we allow ourselves to dwell in the negative emotions like fear and anger and resentment, we activate our saboteurs. These saboteurs are going to cloud our judgment, making it difficult for us to respond the way that we want. The more we remain stuck in negative emotion, it's a cyclone that takes us down. The less that we're able to access our sage, the less that we're able to operate from a place of love and wisdom that we get from God, who's supposed to give wisdom to us liberally if we ask for it. But we're not asking for wisdom when we're trying to survive, right? Because we're not trying to thrive, we're trying to survive. So recognizing when we're in saboteur mode and shifting out of it is key to maintaining clarity and making wise, loving choices in your marriage. I'm going to put up a code here. If you have your phone, you can point it at the screen right now, and you can a link will come up, and press on that link. It's going to take you to our saboteur assessment. You'll have an opportunity to find out exactly which of those 10 saboteurs are messing with you in your marriage. So you can do that. I'll also I'll stick into the chat of our meetings here also the link for you. Give me just a second to do that. All right, there's one on Facebook and then one here on Zoom for everybody. That is, whoops, I put the wrong one. Let me do that again. All right, so that's the right one. Okay, I'll put that one there here in the meeting, and we'll send that over to, there we go. There, you'll have it. All right, so the saboteur assessment is going to tell you which of these 10 characters are messing with you the most, which is really important for you to know and understand. Now, I knew I had the avoider saboteur and the stickler saboteur. I didn't know what to call them, but I knew I had those things. But I had no idea just how much they were messing with me until I took this assessment, and I didn't know what to do about it until I took this assessment. So you're gonna want to do that right after we get off of this meeting here. But let's talk about the sage now, because that's important. We don't want to talk about saboteurs all night. But the sage part of you operates in a region of your brain associated with positive emotions, peace and calm. Who doesn't want that? Clear-headed focus, creativity, and big picture. And your sage operates from what's called the sage perspective. If you can see how these things here would impact your marriage in a good way, I'd love to hear a comment from you. But what is this sage perspective that I mentioned here? Well, the sage perspective can be simply stated in one sentence, and that's why I like it, because it helps me to remember it. The sage perspective is this: every outcome or circumstance can be turned into a gift and opportunity. Every outcome or circumstance can be turned into a gift and an opportunity. 2 Corinthians 4:17 says, "For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all." So you might not appreciate Paul calling your troubles light and momentary, but in the light of eternity, the things that you're going through right now, in light of what Jesus went through for you, your trials right now are light and momentary. But as heavy as they feel right now, the Bible says they are achieving for you an eternal glory that's going to far outweigh all of the things that you've experienced in your life. Why? Because God is going to turn everything that you've ever experienced into a gift and opportunity for you. And I know that there's a bunch of verses I could cite here, but for lack of time, I decided to just talk about that one. This verse emphasizes that every challenge or struggle that you face can be seen as a stepping stone towards something greater, which is God's eternal plan for you. You see, God isn't just concerned about your life in the here and now, though he is. He's really concerned about his eternal plan for you, of which now is part. So it encourages us to shift our perspective, to recognize that even in difficulties, there's an opportunity for growth and to align ourselves with God's purposes. Now, there's a story that I heard this week that I wanted to share with you. It's about the farmer and his wife. There was a farmer and his wife who lived very simple life, yet they were content on that farm. And they had been married for many years. They had seen many seasons together, each bringing its own set of challenges and blessings. They worked side by side, caring for their crops and animals, trusting God for their provision. And then one day, a severe drought struck the land. The crops began to wither, the livestock struggled. The farmer and his wife started getting worried. But they continued to pray, they continued to trust in God's timing. Neighbors came and said to them, "You must be so discouraged. The drought is surely a curse." The farmer replied, "Perhaps, but we trust in God's plan and we know that he is with us in all things." As the drought persisted, the farmer's wife fell ill, and their resources dwindled and the situation seemed dire. Friends and family expressed their sympathy, saying, "What bad luck you have. How will you manage now?" The farmer again responded, "Perhaps, but we lean on God's strength and we know his ways are higher than ours." Well, miraculously, just as hope seemed lost, the rains came. The crops were saved. The animals thrived again. The wife's health improved. She regained her strength. And people marveled at their resilience and said, "You are truly blessed. The rains came just in time for you." The farmer and his wife, they smiled and replied, "Indeed, God's timing is perfect. We have learned to trust him in all of our circumstances." Later, their youngest son, who had been away in the city, he returned to help them on the farm. His return brought joy and additional hands for the work, just as the couple was beginning to tire. The neighbors commented, "How fortunate you are to have your son back at such a crucial time." The farmer responded, "Yes, it is a blessing. We see now how God's plan unfolds in his perfect time, weaving together the good and the challenging to bring about his purposes." Through each trial and blessing, that farmer and his wife remained steadfast in their faith. They learned to see each moment as a part of God's greater story. They trusted that whether they could see it immediately or not, every circumstance was an opportunity to grow closer to God and closer to each other. So here's a question. Which perspective is true? In the story, the people were often looking at the bad, right? Your saboteurs are going to tell you that everything is bad. This is bad. And your sage is going to tell you that everything is a gift. So which one of them is true? And the answer to that is whichever you believe becomes true for you. Another story to help illustrate that, it's about John and Mary. They've been married for 10 years. Over the years, they faced many challenges, financial, parenting styles being different, a lot of misunderstandings. Recently, John has felt that their connection isn't as strong as it used to be, and he starts to believe that their marriage is struggling and they are starting to grow apart. As John harbors these negative beliefs, he begins to see evidence of them everywhere. He notices every small disagreement with his wife. He feels hurt when Mary is busy with the children. He interprets her tiredness as being disinterested in him. This negative beliefs start to create what we would call a self-fulfilling prophecy. John becomes distant. He starts to be less affectionate. He starts to be more critical, which you can imagine causes Mary to feel unloved and unappreciated. Their relationship begins to strain under the weight of all these negative beliefs. Well, let's look at Mary. Mary believes that their marriage is built on a strong foundation of love and mutual respect. Even though they're constantly going through tough times, she remembers their shared experiences, the deep conversations they used to have, the love that they had for each other. She believes that with God's help, they can overcome whatever these current challenges are. You see, Mary's belief in a strong marriage influences her actions. She makes an effort to spend time with John, communicates openly about her feelings, and prays for their relationship. She thinks about Philippians 4:13 all the time. I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. She's trusting that God will give them the strength to navigate these difficulties. It's the same marriage, but two very different perspectives. You see, what each of them believes becomes true for them. So let's do something here to give our minds a break from all of this learning, right? Now that you know about the saboteurs and you know about the sage, now let's learn about self-command. And to learn about self-command, I'm not just going to talk about it. I want you to experience it. So I want to show you how to be still and know that God is God. And in the process, fire up that self-command part of your brain. If you're watching us on Facebook Live, hey, type live in there for me that I know you're there. And if you're watching this later on replay, type replay in there so that we know that you're with us. All right. Now, I'm going to invite you to close your eyes as we become still before God. And I'm going to encourage you to shift your attention away from all the busy thoughts that you've had today. And instead, just focus on your own body. Feel the weight of your body on your seat. Feel the weight of your feet on the floor. Feel the weight of your clothes on your skin. Take a few deep breaths and notice the rising and the falling of your chest and your stomach with each breath. If it's helpful, you can put your hands there and notice the rising and falling of your chest and stomach with each of those breaths. Now, I want you to relax back into the natural rhythm of your breath. Notice the temperature of air as it enters into your nostrils, the slightly different temperature of air as it exits your nostrils. You may become aware of the sensations in your nostrils and how they change with the inhale and the exhale. I want you to let go of any thoughts as they come and just keep refocusing on your physical sensations. Gently rub a couple of fingertips together, like those finger pads, maybe your index finger with your thumb, and notice the fingertip ridges on those fingers. They'll remind you that you were made wonderfully and uniquely by God. Feel those ridges. No one else has that configuration of ridges that way. Notice any texture changes from one area to another. Shifting a little bit, begin gently rubbing all of the fingertips of one hand against the fingertips in the palm of the other hand, and feel all those sensations of touch in your hands, all those fingertip ridges. Now, bring your attention to the sounds around you and notice those that are the farthest away. Maybe it's something distant sound in the house or a neighbor in their yard. Now bring your attention to the sounds that are closest to you, perhaps even the sound of your own breathing. Once again, notice the rising and the falling of your chest and your stomach with each breath. All right. Now I'm going to ask you to drop me a note. If you're watching us on Facebook, drop me a note and let me know what you notice after just a few minutes of doing that. You're here in the meeting with us live on Zoom. You can type in the chat there. Just let me know, what was that like for you? What are you noticing going on in your body right now? Those are mental fitness reps. They're like going to the gym. When you go to the gym, you do physical reps for your body. You lift those weights. Here, we're doing mental fitness reps, repetitions of the same thing to help us be more mentally fit. Now, what I want to do for you is I want to put together everything that we've learned into an operating system. If you have a computer, your computer has an operating system, Windows or Mac, or if you're really weird, there's like Linux or something like that, right? Most of us have Windows or Mac, and that's the operating system. On that operating system, you can run a bunch of different apps. So I'm going to show you an operating system that you can run a lot of different things on to help you with a lot of different things in your life. Just one operating system. It's very simple. That's why we call it the simplicity of the operating system. So here it is. If you're feeling negative emotions, stop. That means you're in saboteur mode or you're about to go there. Do some mental fitness reps, the kind I just showed you, or you can make up your own. They're all body-based, so they're easy to create on your own. And you can do them anytime, anywhere. When you do those mental fitness reps, it's going to quiet the saboteurs and activate the sage. At that time, you're going to assume the sage perspective that every problem can be converted into a gift and opportunity. You're going to receive that gift by using the sage powers like empathy, curiosity, creativity, passion and purpose, and clear-headed action. If you're scratching your head and you're not sure what this looks like, let me tell you about Sarah. Sarah was feeling overwhelmed with financial stress. Her husband, David, just told her that his company is downsizing and there's a possibility that he might lose his job. Sarah immediately begins to worry about their mortgage, the bills, future financial stability. Her mind starts to race with negative thoughts. We'll lose everything. We can't make it through this. This will destroy our marriage. Anyone ever been there with thoughts like that? I know I have. What does Sarah need to do? She needs to stop. Recognize that she's in saboteur mode. Sarah realizes that she's in full saboteur mode. Her mind is flooded with fear and panic and a sense of helplessness. She decides to stop and ask God to help her to take control of her thoughts. She does some mental fitness reps that I just showed you to quiet her saboteurs and activate her sage. She decides to do some mental fitness reps, right? So she focuses on her breathing for a few minutes. Each time she inhales, she notices that. As she exhales, she notices that. And she shifts her attention to the present moment, not the future, not the past of other financial problems they've had in the past, not to the future as to how this is going to look in the future, but to right now in the present moment. She gets back into her body, which is the temple of the Holy Spirit. And then she assumes the sage perspective. The sage perspective is wisdom perspective. It's God's perspective. Sarah reminds herself that every problem can be turned into a gift and an opportunity by her God. She starts to think about how this financial challenge could actually strengthen their marriage and their faith. And then she receives that gift by using the sage powers. Empathy. Sarah thinks about David's perspective. What must David be going through as the provider of the family, and now he may lose his job? How could she show empathy for David? She knows that he must be feeling stress and worry too. She decides to show empathy and support him rather than adding to his stress. Curiosity. She gets curious about their options. What could they do to cut costs? If you have an idea, throw it in the chat. What job opportunities might be out there for David? How can they manage their finances more effectively? Probably got some financiers out there that might have some ideas about that. You can drop your note in the chat there. What about creativity? Sarah starts brainstorming creative ways to save money and generate extra income. That's a good use of time, isn't it? Maybe she could take a part-time job, or she could sell some of the unused items around the house. And what about passion and purpose? She starts to reflect on their shared goals and dreams. What have they What goals do they have? What dreams have they had together? They've always wanted to teach their children about resilience and faith. This challenge could be a powerful lesson for their kids. What could they do around that? And then the last one is clear-headed action. Finally, Sarah takes some practical steps. She makes a list of their expenses. She looks for ways to cut back, and she schedules a time to sit down with David to discuss their budget and plans moving forward. Do you see what a big difference it is when she's in sage mode versus saboteur mode? You see, the outcome is that Sarah starts to feel a sense of calm and clarity now. She no longer feels like a victim of their financial situation, but she starts to see this as an opportunity to grow closer to David and to strengthen their financial habits. Now, when David comes home, he greets her with the big hug, and she greets him with the big hug. And she says, honey, I know we're going to get through this together. Let's sit down and figure out our next steps. So by using her sage powers, Sarah has transformed a potentially destructive situation into a moment where they can have connection and growth and reaffirm their faith that God's going to be there and help them with these challenges. Now, every time I do this, at this point, someone says this question. They raise their hand. Is it really possible to just shift like Sarah did from saboteur to sage response, even in a tough challenge? Now, here's the answer. Yes, it is possible, but the speed at which you're able to do that, the speed at which you're able to catch the sabotage, and the depth of your shift into sage, how deeply you can shift into that, like we just saw her do, is all based on something. It's based on your mental muscle strength. So if you haven't been in the gym, if you go in there and try to bench press 500 pounds like losing your job, you're not going to be able to lift it if you haven't been exercising those muscles before, right? So imagine you're having a disagreement with your spouse about household chores. I don't know if anybody else out there has these kind of arguments in your house like we do, but if your mental muscle is strong, you're going to be able to quickly shift from feeling overwhelmed and resentful to calmly discussing and negotiating a fair distribution of the tasks amongst family members. This mental resilience is going to allow you to resolve the conflict in a good way, maintain positive atmosphere in the home. But you probably know what's going to happen if your mental muscles are not strong. You've already seen that movie 1,000 times, just like I have, right? In my family, things are going to devolve. You're going to get upset. Your spouse is going to get upset. The kids are going to be upset. So how can we change the way that we think and we act during disagreements? Well, in order for me to answer that, I'd have to answer the question as to what lasting change requires. What do we need for lasting change? Because we're not just talking about like a one-time thing of dealing with one disagreement. We know we're going to have disagreements for the length of our marriage. So what are we going to do about that? We need lasting change. And lasting change requires two things: insight and mental muscle. Insight, I understand the problem, or I understand what's going on here. And then 80% is I got to build the mental muscle to be able to handle that thing. So an example for you, if I'm driving home and I know my wife's going to be upset with me, on the way, I'm going to catch myself thinking something like, she's going to be so mad. This is going to be a disaster. Hopefully, I start to realize these thoughts are only making me more anxious and frustrated on my way home. Instead of letting these negative thoughts take over, I want to decide to stop and do some of those mental fitness reps to quiet my saboteurs. I start to visualize myself handling that situation with grace and empathy when I get home. I see myself walking in calmly, listening to her concerns with understanding, and responding with love and patience. You see, by changing my thoughts and my feelings beforehand, I'm equipping myself to handle that situation more effectively. This shift is going to transform a potentially explosive moment into an opportunity for me to have connection and growth. It's also strengthening my mental muscle and bringing positive changes to our relationship one step at a time. Now, you might say, is it that easy to build mental muscle just by imagining yourself handling things the way you want to handle them? Well, sort of, but not really. Success with mental muscle requires intense initial practice. Research shows us that we need 15 minutes a day of mental muscle practice for 6 to 8 weeks before we begin to see real changes in brain structure. And literally, we can see the building of new neural networks in our brain after 6 to 8 weeks of this. But it requires consistent effort over that time. It's kind of like strengthening a muscle, right? I got to go to the gym several times a week if I want to be super strong. For marriage, it means dedicating 15 minutes a day to these mental exercises, like some of the ones I showed you earlier, for 6 to 8 weeks. Now, this practice is going to help you develop new, healthier ways of thinking and responding to your spouse, because you're going to be more in the present moment. Over time, this consistency is actually going to rewire your brain. It's going to help you make positive interactions and be gracefully handling conflict. And it's going to make it more natural. It's going to make it more automatic, just as it's natural and automatic now to devolve into arguments, right? Because that's what you've always been doing, because your survival brain was taking over. So this is about creating lasting change through daily commitment and becoming more Christ-like in the whole process. The challenge is this: most people have trouble doing this 15 minutes of practice on their own. That's why I did my 6-week experiment with a group, because I knew I wouldn't do it if it was just me. But with the other group members doing it, I knew that would push me and motivate me. So I'm going to circle back to my assessment score that I went over with you earlier, so you can see what happened after 6 weeks of me practicing those mental fitness exercises for 15 minutes a day. Here's what happened. Remember, I showed you that 55% of the time my brain was serving me well, but 45% of the time it was sabotaging me. When I was done with this program, this 6-week program that I did called Positive Intelligence, or PQ for short, my score went up to 71% of the time my brain was working for me, and only 30% of the time sabotaging me. I'll tell you, my mind was more clear. I was feeling much more in my body. I was not stuck in my head as much as I had been, and I was able to make decisions with a lot more confidence. I felt closer to God, and I'll tell you, I was a lot more peaceful and content than I can ever remember being in my entire life. And I had a friend that did this program with me. Her name is Marlena, and Marlena got a 100% boost in her mental fitness. She told me at the end of it, she said, I find myself happy most of the time now. And friends, she gave me permission to tell you, she went from a failing grade of 40 on the assessment to an 80, which that's like failing grade to like B minus, right? Whatever study group she's in, I want to be in, right? She had 40% of access to her thriving brain when she started. And when she was done, she was in her thriving brain 80% of the time. No wonder she was so happy. Now, Marlena isn't married as far as I know, but imagine how much her negative thinking was impacting her single life at this time. Imagine how difficult it was for her to have healthy relationships. Imagine how equipped now she is if she does choose to date someone. So if you want to learn more about the program that Marlena and I did, that we went through, I'm going to share that with you right after this prayer that I'm going to pray, so you can stick around if that's something you want to know about. I've actually added to the program a biblical framework to really supercharge the program for you and help you. You know, a lot of the people that listen to my talks are grieving, they're traumatized, they're dealing with overwhelming emotions. And a lot of you listening to this are listening because you want your marriage to be better. All these things are things that the program that I put together and built on top of the one that I experienced myself will help you with all these things. So I like to say this prayer first, and then I'll get into what we'll talk about with that program. But my prayer for you is that God's divine power will give you everything that you need for life and godliness through the knowledge of Him, Jesus, who has called us by His own glory and goodness. God, you've given these couples listening to this webinar tonight everything that they need for life and godliness. So, Lord, let them feel that tonight, Lord, that you've given them all the resources. You've stored up gifts for them in the heavenly realms that they have yet to receive, they have yet to take from you. and let them be hopeful that they can receive those spiritual blessings in the heavenly realms that you have stored up for them, because you've given them everything that they need for this. So that's my prayer for you tonight. Thank you for joining me. I'm going to talk for those who want to know more about this 6-week program that I was a part of. Actually, I made it 7 weeks. I added a week, and I want you to commit to some things, and I want to give you some tools. So I talk about these as your commitments and the tools that I'm going to give you. So we're going to give you 2 assessments. One assessment is that brain assessment to see how much of the time you're in your survival brain and how often you're in that thriving part of the brain. We're going to give you that assessment. We're also going to give you the saboteur assessment so we can know exactly which saboteurs are messing with you right now or messing with your marriage. We're going to ask you to watch a 1-hour weekly video. So every week, we're going to ask you to watch a 1-hour video. That comes out on Saturday. You can watch it Saturday, Sunday, or Monday. The weekly meeting with me is a 1-hour meeting. We meet on Monday evenings at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm going to ask you to show up to that meeting so I can go over what the weekly video talked about, review it with you, make sure you understand it, and help set you up for that 15 minutes a day of practice. And we're going to give you an app that is going to guide you to do these 15 minutes of practice, but to do it in 2 or 3 minute increments. So it won't take up a lot of your time and it won't completely mess with your day. We're just going to ask for 2 or 3 minutes at a time. And by the end of the day, it's going to add up to 15 minutes. So you can get that 15 minutes in a day that we know is that intense initial practice that your mind needs to begin the rewiring process. I'm going to ask you to check in with me every day. Just a couple of sentences. Let me know how you're doing. In the app, there's a channel there, and all the people that are in my group, like 10 or 15 people in that group, are going to be doing their check-ins with me in that app. You're going to see their check-ins. They're going to see yours so that we can encourage each other, so we can pray for each other. I'm going to ask you to read 8 chapters of the Positive Intelligence book. It's really super easy reading. Even someone like me could understand it. If I can understand it, you can. So I'm only asking for 1% to 2% of your waking hours. This isn't going to take a lot of your time, but trust me, it's going to begin that rewiring of your brain process. This group is a 7-week group, and the next one's going to start somewhere around September 7th is when I anticipate we're going to start this group, and it will end on Monday, October 21st. And the meetings will be Mondays at 6:30, 1-hour meeting. And we will have a recording available for you if you miss 1 or 2 meetings during the 7 weeks. We'll send you a recording of the meeting so you don't miss it. If you happen to be watching this recording after this September 7th date, just reach out to me to find out when our next group is starting, because we will do this group about every 9 weeks or so. So what's your investment? We have arranged to offer you the app. The app costs $995 if you purchase it from the company that I get it from. If you try to do that, it's going to cost you $995. You'll have access to the whole program for a year, but we're going to give that to you as part of this process. I'm going to be there in the app coaching you every day for 7 weeks. It's my life for 7 weeks is you in the group. That amount of my time costs like several $1,000s. The weekly coaching that I'm going to do in those 6 group meetings is another over $1,000 worth of my time. And then we're going to give you those assessments, and we're going to give you the audio book and a PDF book of Positive Intelligence. So we're also going to give you access to this small group community. Like, I would not have gotten as much I would have gotten out of this program if it weren't for the people that were in my group, because when they talked about what they were dealing with, it helped me understand, A, I wasn't alone, but B, it gave me a different perspective. And there's just no way to put a price tag on that. We actually also have access to the larger Positive Intelligence community, where we can interact with people all over the world who are doing the program at the same time we are. And I've met so many wonderful people in there and learned so much from people, because people are honest and they vulnerably share in those channels. And I learned just from reading things they're saying in there. If we add up all the things that we're going to give you, it costs us about over $4,000 to deliver this group to you. The cost of a brake job and a transmission job, if you took your car to the mechanic. Now, obviously, we're not going to charge you that much, but think about this. If you got a brake job for your car and a transmission job for your car, it'd be a significant investment. And if you're on this webinar tonight, my hunch is that you need a brake job for your brain, because I needed it a year ago. And you need a transmission job for your brain to get into those 5 gears that we talked about that your thriving brain has. Most of us don't even realize that we have those access to that stuff. But we're going to do that for you. We're going to give you a brake job for your brain, a transmission job for your brain. Now, what happens is we receive $995. That's $995 if you pay for the program up front for us. So with us. So for the cost that you would buy the app for, we're going to give you 7 weeks of daily coaching for that same price. And you can apply if you need to for a loan with one of our partners to get that money up front if you need to. But we also offer a no risk guarantee. If you take the brain assessment at the beginning and you don't see a significant difference in what happens to your brain over those 6 to 8 weeks, we're just going to hand you your money back at the end. All right. Or we'll keep working with you until you get the result that we knew that you could get. Now, there is limited availability for the number of people that I can have in the group. So you should act right away by reaching out to me after this meeting through the chat there on Facebook or the contact information that I'll place here at the end, because we just have a few places available for people. So let me put up the information for that here. You can text me at that number that I have on the screen. You could also grab 30 minutes on my calendar to talk about how this may be a benefit to you. I'll place that as well into the chat for people. All right. And yeah, this is an opportunity for you to jump on board. I just have a few more slots available for that September group. So if you want to sign up without talking to me about it, you're ready to go. I know some people are always raring to go for these kinds of things. You can use that code right there, or you can go to checkyourcompass.org/unlock, and you'll see a webinar like this that I've done before that's less focused on marriage and more focused on individuals. If you scroll down to the bottom, you'll see a place to be able to enroll into the program. As I like to say every time toward the end of this is, if you cannot fund that group for yourself, and you feel that God really wants you to do this, I'm going to ask you to reach out to me privately. We have some options to make this available for those for whom it would be a financial hardship. So you're going to reach out to me personally, okay? All right, thank you for joining us. God bless